Hey guys, Rick Stone here from Stony Acres Gardening. Welcome to my channel. Today we're going to do a 5-minute Friday where I give you a gardening tip in 5 minutes or less, and we are going to be talking about year-round gardening, what it is and why you should be worried about it in July. So before we get started, make sure you get subscribed to my channel and let's go. So what is year-round gardening? Year-round gardening is essentially using techniques to extend your growing season into the fall, the winter, and the early spring months. So we're going to use a bunch of different techniques to extend that growing season. Generally, it means growing cool season crops during those non-traditional times of the year. So here we're talking about growing Brassica family in the fall. We're talking about fall and winter leafy greens and root crops. And then we're talking about getting our spring plantings in much earlier than most people traditionally do. This allows us to extend our growing season to where we actually are able to have something to harvest from your garden 365 days a year. I've been able to do that for 14 years now. So this is a fun concept, something that I really like doing. So how do you do this? You do it by planting at the right time, choosing the right crops, and protecting those crops from the winter cold. So planting at the right time involves getting plants in so that they are ready to go before the short days come. So once our daylight reaches about 10 hours, we actually don't have enough growing light left. And so we need to have those plants to maturity before that time arrives. So planting them at the right time is super important. Also, choosing the right crops is obviously important. We're not going to be growing tomatoes in January in Garden Zone 5. It's just not going to happen. Instead, we're going to be doing things like leafy greens and root crops that are hardy and are going to stand up to those winter temperatures. And then we need to make sure that we are protecting those crops from the winter cold. And there are 3 really inexpensive and easy ways to protect those crops from the cold. The first one is fabric row covers. So here we're talking about the heavy fabric row covers. Those are going to do really well at protecting a lot of our crops through the winter months. Another thing that is really good for protecting your crops is hoop houses. So we love to have a couple of mini hoop houses that go over our raised beds. Sometimes we'll even put some out in our main garden. Hoop houses are great for extending the growing season. And then of course you can use cold frames as well. And a cold frame is a little wooden box that is covered with some type of a glass lid that allows crops to be protected and grow really well. You can also, of course, use a greenhouse to do all of this if you have one. I'm just not big on spending a lot of money on my garden, and so I want to use those simpler, cheaper options like hoop houses and cold frames. Now, where can you do this type of gardening? For those of you that live in zones 8, 9, and 10, the really warm zones, this should not be a big deal for you. You should be able to grow year-round, have a 365-day-a-year harvest pretty easily. For those of us that live in zones 5, 6, and 7, it's a little bit harder to do. You are going to, of course, have to have some protection, a hoop house or a cold frame, in order to make that happen in zones 5, 6, and 7. It gets a little bit more tricky in the really cold zones, zones 3 and 4. But it's not impossible. Even in zones 3 and 4, there are a handful of crops that you can grow through the winter months so that you can extend that growing season to 365 days a year. Now, why the heck am I talking about fall and winter gardening in July? The reason why is because it's almost time for a lot of us to get ready for those fall gardens, believe it or not. A lot of our planting needs to be done 6 to 8 weeks before our first fall frost date. So for a lot of you, that's fairly soon. For me, my first fall frost date is about October 1st, which means I'm going to actually start planting leafy greens and root crops right around August 1st, only a few weeks away. So it's really important that you start thinking about what you're going to be growing in the fall now and get your seeds coming and your beds ready so that you can get those things planted now. It's super important to make that happen at this time. All right, I do have a few resources for you to kind of help you out on your year-round gardening journey. We have a free mini course that I would love to have you get signed up for. There's a link in the description of this video that you can click on. It'll take you over. It's about a 45-minute video that gives you a really good introduction to year-round gardening. That one's down there in the description of this video. We also have a master course that is only on sale in July, and the sale this year is going to be from July 10th through the 17th. That's a paid course, and there's a link for that in the description of this video as well. So click on that. Those are both really good resources that will help you learn more about growing year-round. All right, that's all I have for you for this week. Everybody have a fantastic week. Make sure you check out those resources, and we'll talk to you next week. Happy gardening.